Don't worry about it. I don't, um, I have to be sure, I have to have the audit schedule. So,
Good morning, everyone. Madam Chair, it appears we have a quorum, so if you'd like me to read through the preamble, then we can get the meeting started if you're ready and that's all right with you.
Yes, please.
Okay. This is the July 18th, 2024 meeting of the Historic Ohio City Design Review Committee. Just to go over the virtual meeting regulations and procedures. The meeting shall be conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the start of any presentation. The recused committee member will then leave the meeting for the duration of the case discussion. The chair will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the committee. The administrator will introduce the first project. The meeting will then be turned over to the applicant to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the committee. Once the presentation is concluded, the administrator will provide any background information if applicable and will read any received comments. The committee will then begin deliberations and project review. Please use the raised hand feature. Any deliberations and review concludes. After deliberations and review concludes, the committee will render its recommendation and/or motion. The applicant may leave the meeting at any point after their project review is complete. All projects will follow the same format until all projects are heard by the committee. And then once all projects are heard, the chair will call for any committee/administrator reports. After all reports have been heard, the chair will adjourn the meeting. Regarding community comments, any and all community members may provide their written comments, thoughts, or questions regarding projects presented to the committee. Community members may also telephone their comments or questions to the committee administrator, which is myself. All comments, thoughts, or questions must be submitted to the committee administrator no later than 48 hours prior to the start of the meeting. Again, these can be done through email, phone, or dropped off in person or mailed to us here at City Hall. Public comment received after the deadline will not be heard by the committee. Public comment will be collected by Landmark staff and sent to the committee members for review prior to the scheduled meeting. Landmark staff will summarize the received comments. The applicant of the project is under no obligation to answer any community questions. Community members are invited to attend the Design Review Advisory Committee meetings, but there will be no open public comment period. Regarding design review guidelines, all projects are being reviewed using the Secretary of the Interior standards of rehabilitation and are considered for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. All projects are considered on a case-by-case basis, and the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee makes recommendations to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. These recommendations are not final actions. Depending on the scope of the project, submissions may be approved administratively or will need to be reviewed by the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. If that's the case, projects will be scheduled at the next available commission meeting after an action is taken. So with that, Madam Chair, would you like to call the meeting to order?
Sure. I'm calling to July 18th Ohio City Historic Design Review meeting to order.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Flaherty? Ms. Land?
Here.
Ms. Marinucci? Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Persons?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
And Mr. Tripsano?
Here.
All right, Madam Chair, we have a quorum. And our first project is case number HOC 24-20, 1795 West 44th Street. Vinyl siding installation. We have a representative from PAPS Construction here to talk us through their proposals. So if you want to walk us through your proposal, just let me know when you'd like me to change slides.
Okay, well, my name is Kathy with PAPS Construction, and my boss Greg had to step in another meeting. So if you have any questions, I can just grab him very quickly. The owner of the property at 44th Street, the previous siding, wood siding, was old, dilapidated, warped, and peeling. So he wanted it replaced with the vinyl siding, exact same color, and nothing changed. It was only nothing changed on the structure. It's the same siding. We didn't change anything, just replaced the siding. And that's it. There were photos before photos that showed the worked boards and then the replacement siding with just the new siding. Oh, that's a picture of what it looked like previously. You can see the warped boards and the peeling on the siding. And these are just the site measurements and of the site and what the structure actually looks like. This is just taken from an eagle view, and this is the proposal given to the owner for the siding and gutter. And the materials were used certainteed monogram. Right. And that's it.
Right. Madam Chair, if you don't mind, before we get into the discussion, I apologize. I was using an old recommendation form here, so I missed Mr. Krondorf in the roll call. So it looks like he's here. So Alex, I guess we can.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay. Yep. We got you. All right. I apologize for that. Yeah. So we still have quorum. I did also want to just point out, obviously the work on this project has already been done. The siding is installed. So it's, certainly not the order of things we like to go in. So we've been trying to work with the applicant to prepare a design review presentation and come before us, pull a permit and all that. But as you can see, the work is done, and while the color hasn't changed much, they have sort of covered over all of the stick details that the front facade of the house once had. So that I will let you guys get into your discussion.
So do I understand then that there's vinyl siding over the historic wood siding, but that the wood siding remains in place?
No, I believe they took that off, but I can go check.
So they took the wood siding in the image that's on the screen off and replaced it with vinyl siding?
Yes.
Well, this committee rarely, if ever, approves vinyl siding, especially on the front facade of a house within the historic district. And I think that it needs to be removed, and the wood siding put back if it exists, or replicated and replaced.
Okay, well, one moment, let me go grab.
How you doing?
Hello? Yeah, we can hear you, Greg.
Okay, so you want all the original wood taken off the house and put new wood all back up, even though there's other people in that neighborhood using vinyl siding?
No, the
No.
question was, did the wood get removed prior to the vinyl installation?
No, not all the wood. We replaced wood that needed to be replaced, but we didn't remove wood that needed to be painted.
So the wood, like for example, the image that's on the screen right now, the front facade, that wood is intact underneath the vinyl?
Yes, ma'am. And then we put a insulation over top of that siding that's there. And then we actually installed the vinyl siding.
Okay, does that clarify, Alex, to your point?
Yes, it does. And removed the vinyl siding should be. We can talk about vinyl siding on
Okay.
the rear of the structure, but it's a no-go on the front.
Okay. So I'm okay on 3 sides, but not on the front.
No, 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 no.
Do other,
You're okay. I would be okay on the back. I would not be okay on the front or the two sides that are visible from the public right away.
I think we need to do a site visit. I mean, there's literally 5 feet between 2 houses.
Okay.
do other
Well, you see-
committee members?
I am okay with the wood on the front. I am looking at it in Google Street View, and you can see there's barely, a lot of the sides aren't showing, although the facade that is facing the front, like it has that porch recess, so all of that would have to be wood. Obviously, everything we're seeing in the image, and then on the other side of the house, there's also a recess that's kind of similar. So, but yeah, I'm okay with just wood on the front,
Okay.
and vinyl on the sides and back.
I think it would make sense to take the vinyl off back to the wood, down to the cross gable at least.
Yes.
So that as you're walking down the street, you at least get that original material up to the point of the cross gable. And of course, I would expect that all those original trim details are either reinstated or restored.
We
it-
left most of those. And they're being painted. They didn't get wrapped in aluminum.
So you're saying that the sticking, what Margaret's referring to is that in the
Oh,
previous
you're talking
images,
about the
white
band board that was
sticking.
there. All of that will go back to the way it was.
Yes.
I
and
thought
are
you were talking
clear-
about the corbels and stuff like that on the porch.
Yes, also
Those
that.
are, those
Those
are
all
here.
stayed.
Okay. So are you, is it clear what we're talking about on the, taking it back to the
Yes.
wood to the cross gable?
Yes.
So, and I would say on the, like, I think it's like south side of the house that's a bit more visible. I would prefer it to also, like, that you're returning that return that has the original sticking on it as well, be exposed. And then from that corner board beyond, I would be okay
That's
with that
exactly
as
what
well.
I'm suggesting, yeah.
Okay,
Yep, I agree with that.
great. Anyone else? Dan, does this need to also go on the landmarks?
Yeah, I think we had anticipated going to landmarks unless, I guess if there's a strong agreement on the committee here, with, it sounds like there is, if you guys move forward with a motion kind of outlining what you've discussed and the applicant is comfortable with that resolution, then that's fine. If the applicant would like to take it to Landmarks Commission, we're more than happy to bring it next week. If they, want to argue their case again.
Okay, so are there any other comments from my colleagues?
I would just add that if the homeowner wants a replacement material that's, not the original wood because of its state of deterioration, that there are other options, either a like for like, a cedar lap or an approved replacement material like a fiber cement board. So I just hope that the building owner is aware that there are some other choices.
That's a good note.
All right, does someone want to make a motion then, I guess?
I will go ahead. let me try to do this correctly. I would like to make a motion to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project vinyl installation on the rear and sides up to the return of the cross gable, and that everything at the front and to the corner board of the cross gable be removed, and that or the original wood be restored. Did I say that correctly?
You included the trim in that too.
And trim, thank you.
And then I second.
Dan, can you call the roll?
Sure thing. Sorry, just trying to write it all down.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't mean to rush you.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Frendor,
Yes.
Ms. Land,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Persons,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Trevisano,
Yes.
and Ms. Marinucci.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously. Kathy, we can, circle back this afternoon, but essentially if you guys are happy and satisfied with this conclusion, we can, you can kind of proceed and we'll update the permit application. If you'd like to go to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission next week to kind of argue, argue your case again with the recommendation from this committee being what it is, we can discuss that too. So I'll be in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next up, we have case HOC 24-21 at 2814 Detroit Avenue. The Royal Docks Brewing Company signage. Should have someone from Blink Signs here for this presentation.
Yeah, it's Mark Branovic with Advanced Installation. Blink Signs is the sign designer.
Okay.
Next slide,
So yeah,
please.
if you want to go
Oh,
through
sorry.
the slides, just
Yeah.
let me know when you want me to switch slides.
Thank you, sir. So good afternoon, or I'm sorry, yeah, good afternoon at this point. First slide, we have an overhead of the property, 2814 Detroit Avenue. We're proposing a wall sign on the south elevation and a blade sign on the east elevation. Next slide, please. We have a rendering before and after of the state of the building as is, and a rendering of the proposed wall sign. Next slide, please. An overview of the square footage. Comes in at 31.32 square foot for that wall sign. Backlit channel letters are illuminated with LED. Next slide, please. It's an attachment detail showing attachment to the fascia. Fascia's brick. Outlines all electrical connections. Raceway detail. We'll have spacers, 3-inch spacers, painted to match the brick. Next slide, please. There's an overview of the blade sign. Before and after. It is a projecting sign, also illuminated. Next slide, please. There's a more front view of the blade sign, the proposed blade sign. Next slide, please. And again, a rendering of two-sided LED illuminated attachment details. That's what I got for you.
Thanks, and Madam Chair, I do have some information on variances that would be required for this one. So for the first ID, the wall sign, There's 63 feet of frontage reserved for this, the unit that Royal Docks will be taking up. So they're allowed 119 square feet. Is the max allowed it. So they're proposing 21 square feet. So that's conforming, no variance is needed. For the projecting sign, they are allowed 12 square foot maximum. They're proposing 79 square feet. So that is non-conforming. So it would need a 67 square foot variance. And then they are allowed to project 4 foot 5 inches from the wall, or I'm sorry, 4 foot 5 inches from the wall is being proposed as the projection. And 4 is code, so they would need a 5-inch projection variance as well. If you guys would like to, if you guys like the proposal, I would just include support for any needed variances in a recommendation, as the Cleveland Landmarks Commission does have the authority to grant variances. So yeah, with that, let me know what slides you guys want me to shoot in on. And
I'm happy to start and say that I like the design and the just the plan submitted. I think that particular building, so close butting up to the shoreway right there, is very unique in its positioning, and I think it needs a little bit of magic there. I think we've seen a couple previous attempts at doing it there, kind of have that be a tough location. So I think the variance for this sign being a little larger, I think that could be some of the magic there, and I don't think the design really conflicts with other historical types of signs that we've had in the commercial areas of the city. So I would be inclined to approve, but I ventured and went first. Obviously, I'm curious to hear what my fellow colleagues, committee members think. So that's all for me.
I'd like to agree with that. I have no problem with the signage themselves or its placement. My only comment is that when affixing them, and it looks like in one of the slides you showed the profile of how it's attached, that it be mounted through the mortar joints and not through the brick, so that if it's ever removed, it's done so without permanent damage to the side of the building.
That was my only comment as well. I agree with my Alex and Angelo elsewhere.
I have a quick question. Tide House is not the name of the business, correct?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Tide House
What-
is not the name of the business, correct?
The information I have is that the business is Royal Docks Brewing Company. I don't know anything about Kai House.
Okay. Just it's quite large for it to not be the name of the business, so it's a bit confusing to me. I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah,
I don't have a
understand.
problem
I
with
take
the
your meaning.
style. Yeah, the style and the scale doesn't bother me, but I just it's confusing. I don't know what it means, and I guess I have a hard time approving something when I don't know what it means and that it's not the name of the business. I don't know if anyone else has insight on that.
Just looking it
Yeah.
up real quick, it looks like it's a part of their branding.
Okay.
Tide House plus Kitchen. Yeah, I guess it's a part of the company.
I believe it has to do with something being affiliated with a tavern. So it's a topical designation or a type of business.
Yeah, and in all the
Royal
branding I
Docks.
can find from them. Oh, sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead.
In all the branding I can find from them, Tide House is emphasized more so than Royal Docks.
I guess from the United Kingdom, a Tide House is the public house required to buy at least some of its beer from a particular brewery. So there's probably some beerologist out there that there's some connection between beer brewers. I don't know. I don't drink. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I believe it's a reference to being tied to that specific brewery. You know, where that's going to be the primary brands you're selling. So it's not being brewed there. It's tied to brewery through purchasing, I believe.
Thank you. It's not a sticking point for me. I was just confused.
Yeah, I just Googled a Cleveland Scene article that I can't, for some reason, the chat's not available to me right now. Otherwise, I would have shared it. But it just says that like North Dock or Royal Docks Brewing has announced plans to open a tap room called Tide House and Kitchen. Anyways,
And thereby the connection, I take it tied to the brewing company.
Sounds like it's. Can we make a motion?
Yeah. I can make a motion. Okay.
I was going to make a motion to approve as presented with the notes that they should be tying in to the mortar and to approve the two variances asked for this blade sign area and projection.
I'll second.
All right, hearing there's no other discussion, make a motion to approve is presented with support for any needed variances and a note that any penetration through the building should be through mortar joints. So, Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Flaherty? I'm sorry, she's not here. Mr. Brownberg?
Yes.
Ms. Land?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Persons?
Yes.
Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Trevisano?
Yes. Yes.
And Ms. Marinucci?
Yes.
Right, Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Could I have some clarification that so the variances still need to go through another meeting?
Correct.
And
We'll have
could you clarify the amount that was for the wall sign?
Yes, well, the wall sign was in compliance. It is the projecting sign that needs a 79 square foot, or I'm sorry, a 67 square foot variance and a 5-inch projecting variance. So the Cleveland Landmarks Commission can issue those variances. You'll have to attend a meeting next week on July 25th and make your presentation then. And if approved, the commission at that point will grant those variances and you won't have to go to Board of Zoning Appeals or anything like that.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
We'll send you information about next week's meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have another sign, case HOC 24-22 at 2600 Detroit Avenue. It's the BJAR signage, and I do want to apologize. It looks like Miss Flaherty has joined us, and I missed that, so having a rough time today apparently. So she's present, and I'll make sure I call her for the next role. But it looks like we have Mr. Vasey here from Signature Signs to present the BJAR signage. So James, let me know when you want me to click through the slides.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I guess it is afternoon now, so good afternoon, board. James Vasey with Signature Sign Company presenting new signage for BJAR restaurant. Dan, you can go to the next page. So this is a enclosed cabinet or raceway with exposed neon or neo blue neon on it. You can see it did a kind of a daytime and nighttime shot of this of what it looked like. Square footage is, we're under the square footage allowed. It's 17.50 square footage. We're allowed a little over 22 square feet. So the square footage is good for it. There's a little bit better detail, Dan, on the, if you can go to the next page, just to give the board a little bit better idea how the construction of the sign is. So it's a 3-inch deep closed cabinet, which would have the power supplies inside that enclosure. And then there's an additional 2-inch lip around the whole edge of the sign. So it looks like a big cloud sign, but instead of a polycarbonate face bead in there, there's neon there. So I think it's kind of doing like a retro 70 type of look here. That's pretty much all I had. Dan, did you get I sent you the revised sheet for the installation, how it's mounted. Oh, there it is. Okay. So actually it's, when you look at the front of that building, it looks like it's a big I-beam. And I think that's what it's supposed to look like, but it's actually a flat plate with 2 4x4 angles welded onto that back to give it an I-beam look. We're just going to mount to those 4x4s. So we'll have weld nuts on there so that we can bolt on another angle, and then that will bolt on to the back of the sign itself. So if there's any other questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can.
All right, and just from the staff, as Mr. Vacy mentioned, there are no variances needed. So it's just, James, this is actual neon. It's not the LED to look like neon. Is that?
I'm sorry, Dan.
James is it's actual neon sign. It's not.
Yes.
It's not
Yes,
the LED
it's
to
not.
look like neon.
It's actual glass neon. It's not a LED type of neon product.
Thanks.
I have no issue with this. I think unless somebody has a comment on it, I think I would make a motion to approve as it's presented, unless someone has something else.
I would second.
Right, hearing no other discussion, we have a motion to, let me see if I can get the phrasing right. To recommend the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness as presented. So Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Flaherty?
Yes.
Mr. Frendorf?
Yes.
Ms. Land? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Persons?
Yes.
Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Trevisano?
Yes.
And Ms. Marinucci?
Yes.
All right, Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously. I think since no one seemed to have any issues, approved as presented, James, I can go ahead and handle the rest of the permit application when it comes in administratively. I don't think we need to go to the Landmarks Commission for this one. So, yeah, we'll be in touch. And thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, board.
And next up, we have case HOC 24-23, 4307 Clinton Avenue. Construction of a new carriage house. We have our very own Nia Marinucci to present. So I assume there'll be a recusal.
Yes, I will be recusing.
Which, Phil, that makes you the chair for
Yes.
this one. All right.
You want me to start, Dan?
Sure. Yeah, whenever you're ready, just yeah, let me know when you want me to advance.
Okay, for context to my colleagues, Dan and staff felt that we could just do a final review versus concept first due to the situation on the alley, meaning like the project's situation on the alley, but also as you'll see, I think the design intent here is quite straightforward. And we have enough detail they felt at this point to go for final review. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that, not that we were skirting the concept. My client Bob Bigger is also on the call, I see. So Bob, chime in if you'd like to at any point. But we are looking at 4307 Clinton Avenue at Carriage House at the rear of their property on Vine Court. Next slide. Here are some existing conditions. The existing main house from Clinton Avenue. They're on the south side of the street. And then you can see the existing two-car garage that would be demoed to create the carriage house, as well as some of the context of the townhome project that's happening immediately next door. So there will be like primary townhome residence on the alley next door to the proposed carriage house. Next slide. Just general aesthetic direction and inspiration that you'll see reflected in our design. Next slide. Here is a siting for the carriage house itself. You can see we're maintaining a 3-foot setback along the parcel line, especially adjacent to the future townhome that's under construction. The other side, like from the site plan, appears that it's less than 3 feet, but it's actually a covered walkway, which is permitted to be within that kind of 3-foot setback. But that's our intent is to, you can see on the more zoomed in one that it's about 5 feet from the actual parcel line in terms of the finished livable space. Yes, thank you, Dan, for that. Next slide. Just a general kind of floor plan preview. The first floor is a 2-car garage with some storage, that covered walkway leading back to the alley, kind of connecting the alley to their backyard, a little mudroom space, and then the second floor would be a studio style apartment. Next slide. Elevation views, we just have a pretty nondescript, like, you know, front facing gable with a shed dormer to the west. It's, I think, fairly self-explanatory via the elevations that we're showing. We are proposing from a materiality standpoint, hardy siding. We actually aren't decided on if we want to do a standard lap siding or if we would like to do the hardy shingles. The next slide shows that option. But we are proposing 3/4 light doors with SDLs at the mudroom in the apartment entrance, and then a solid door at the garage entrance and that side. You can see that in that side east elevation. And a 6/6 division style window, both casements and double hungs would be utilized on the project. And then for the door itself, the garage doors itself, I should say, for the vehicles, a carriage door, garage door style that faces the alley front. And then the next slide, please. That is showing the shingle siding option. Again, we're not fully decided on between those two, but I would think and hope that either would be acceptable pending your feedback. Next slide. And then for this materiality scheme, I'm showing the existing paint palette of the main house. We'd like to complement it, but perhaps be a little bit more separated and playful with the carriage house itself. So we're proposing the colonial slate finish of the dimension style. Oh my God, dimension shingle style. Sorry guys, it's been a long week for me, solo momming. And then I have both the smooth and the straight edge shingle materiality options for the siding. And then we'd like to propose the kind of reddish, muted reddish pink Rojo dust as the body, the Renwick beige as the accent, and then our trim in the ivory lace. Window finish, we are proposing Marvin cashmere and then like a copper traditional lantern style. We haven't spec the exact piece yet, but that's the certainly the design intent and basis of design. I think that's it. So we welcome feedback.
That is all we have. Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in as Nia mentioned, they did make an application for concept review with essentially what you see here, and staff discussed it and thought that this seemed like a lovely project, given its lack of sight lines from any main street. It's not near a corner or anything, so it's just on the alley. We felt that it could kind of skip through the concept level and go right for final review, because this seems pretty well thought out, and yeah, we didn't see any glaring issues that we thought would take a lot of deliberation. So we encourage them to just submit for final, which they did.
Does anybody, I guess we're opening up for comments. I think it's lovely. I think it's an improvement on the alley. And I hope that any other people living off the alley kind of follow suit. I think it's a really wonderful proposal. So yeah, we're opening up to comments.
I'll jump in here. Just a couple questions or considerations on my end. First one is an easy one. The 6-panel door going into the garage, was there a reason you wanted to do a 6-panel instead of something more in keeping with that 3/4 light, just so that they felt kind of the same language? It's not a dispositive or anything. It's just kind of something that stuck out to me.
The impetus there was, and I think this is kind of a more minor detail, if anyone feels strongly, but the south, like rear facing that faces the house, that is meant, is like that mudroom space. And then the other one that uses a light is the apartment entrance. So to me, those both felt like kind of more finished, in this hierarchy of space, those are kind of like finished spaces that you would enter in and out of. And then the garage door itself was more of like the utilitarian, like you're just going straight into the garage type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think my thought process, and can it be more, just even if the panel configuration was more of the same architectural language, and it was just a consideration. The other main question was the scallop siding that features prominently on the house facade. Was there thought given to maybe does that belong, or could it belong on this carriage house in lieu of the shake option? And I don't know, it's not a dispositive, it's something like, hey, that's something that features prominently on that gable front of the main residence. Does that make sense to apply here to tie the entire composition of both structures together? I think any of the three, if you're lumping that scallop siding in, I think any of the three could be successful and be beautiful. Those were the only two big ones. And then the third one was just seeing the lantern reference, the image that you had. Are you actually thinking about doing gas powered wall lighting?
I would, so for both of those points, I would defer to Bob, who's on the call. I would expect that we would probably not do gas in both running gas to the garage, but just from the cost of that. But Bob, correct me if I'm, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. Chime in if you'd like to. The other, right, okay, because ideally we wouldn't have to run gas at the one utility. I think we would not run to the carriage house just from a cost standpoint. Though of course would love that. But for the scallop, I am certainly not opposed. We did not explicitly discuss that. My mindset is more that they're willing to put the investment into hardy board, which is obviously an elevated material. If we went to a scallop, I personally do not like Hardy's rendition of the scallop. I don't think it's
Yeah.
authentic. I think it's inauthentic. So if we went to mimic one of the other decorative sidings, it would then go to cedar, which would be an even bigger cost jump. So
Yep.
again, would defer to my clients, but that's where my mind goes.
Yeah. Well, again, I think any of the three would be successful and beautiful in my mind. So I have no issues with this kind of as presented, even if either of the two options is presented were to go forward. So really well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Or anyone want to make a motion? Since I cannot.
I can make a motion. So making a motion to recommend for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness as presented.
Second.
All right, hearing no other discussion, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Flaherty,
Yes.
Mr. Frondor,
Yes.
Ms. Land,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Persons,
Yes.
Mr. Trevisano,
Yes.
and Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously. Sonia and Bob, we have you leave on the agenda for next week, unless I'll be in contact with you, Nia, about which I can't remember. If we had a full agenda. We had to move it back or not, but I will email you or call you this afternoon and let you know next steps.
Great.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. So moving on to our final agenda item for the day, we have this is a case that has gone through you guys and then through the Landmarks Commission. So it has a Landmarks Commission case number. It's 23-100. The Bridgeworks apartment building at 2429 Superior Avenue. I know it's sort of short notice, but yesterday afternoon, after one of the committee members had kind of requested some background on the previous reviews, I sent the recordings of last time this went through the local committee and through the Landmarks Commission, because it's it was a significant departure from what had previously approved, I guess a year or two ago, and so we're seeing revisions to what they came with last time. So with that, we have
Dan, I will need to recuse from this project.
Okay.
So Philip, you're taking the reins.
All right.
Yes, we have Ben, Ben and Jen. Are you guys both here to present this one?
Correct. Ben and Jen
Okay.
are actually sitting in the same room, along with Brian Jarzinski, also an architect on the project. I know last time presented, Brandon Klein was probably here. He is on vacation, and so I am here stand-in for today.
Okay. Well, yeah, we have your presentation up on the screen. So if you just, let me know when you want me to click through the slides, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I hope when you mentioned, significant changes, that was all good changes as we walk through them. I think our last appearance here was maybe not received so well. So correct, this project was here in several different previous formats. One by us was hotel apartment mixed use. Prior to that, it was a 16, 17-story building. We are back today with a revised program. We will be sharing all apartment use, certainly some ancillary uses, but have toned down that program and drove a number of the design decisions made to get us back here. So next slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on context, site location, as I believe we have seen this before. Next slide, we have a really great site, right? So the Detroit Superior Bridge in West 25th across from St. Malachi's. Nice corner to develop. We're kind of honored and excited to be a part of this project, right? So the history of the bridge, the ticket booth that is still there, upper right corner, St. Malachi, obviously a driving factor in our site. Next slide. And then certainly excited about the funding that got approved to reopen that bridge underpass and what that means for this project. But again, some more context, looking down the viaduct, other shots of St. Malachi coming from north on West 25th, some mixed use on the opposite side of the street. Next slide. And some of what we see there existing, so the left side, the existing opening to the underpass, the pedestrian bridge piece, the state of the existing ticket booth, which we still have every intention to maintain. Next slide. And so existing conditions highlighted in that dark gray thick line, the two-story building, we are planning on demolishing to make room for our new apartment building. And again, the T-shaped ticket booth, they're kind of on the bottom left, remaining on our site intact. Next slide. As previously discussed, there was intention on both ownership and I think this committee to resalvage some of the pieces there and try and find a meaningful place to reuse and repurpose them. I believe you have seen this before, the intention of the exterior materials we are planning on saving and reusing as we develop our elevations. Next slide. We kept this slide in here just for continuity. We do have created a rather nice sized plaza around that ticket booth and as an entrance from the pivotal corner into our building. These were some of the inspiration photos we had originally shared on how to create some space that's travel friendly for pedestrians and can host events and outdoor activities and be an active live space in that intersection. Next slide. So the gist of the changes, we are still 7 stories, a total of 294,000 square feet with 219 units, a mix of studio, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. We have surface grade but under building parking on floor 1 and then interior parking on floor 2, totaling 199 spaces, which we are compliant with the multiplier and the zoning use here with that 199 spaces. We did not need variances on that. But you can see how this all comes together. West 25th on the left. To the north, our shared viaduct with St. Malachi. You'll notice we've toned down this entrance a bit as it's no longer, I'm a hotel, stop and park your car here, valet, but really becomes more of the leasing entry point and still maintaining a respectful elevation down the viaduct. The gray kind of splitting our building in two, what we've called the connection piece that is getting vehicles not only into the parking servicing the building, but that major connection to the underpass and how that flows together. And then on the bottom left, how our plaza has developed, keeping the ticket booth intact, creating a little more open space than we originally had around that ticket booth, so that we have a nice flow of pedestrians as well along the bridge to the underpass. Next slide. So the following, a couple studies of exactly how those pedestrians flow through the site, you know, taking advantage of the plaza, the green line getting us down along the south of the building to the connection piece or through the connection piece and taking advantage of that underbridge. One of the concepts you'll see as we move forward is, although this is interior parking, trying to create the ability of coordinating with, I believe it's the county teams and the bridge and the events that they've been hosting, and playing off of that with the ability to perhaps have a pop-up here or a farmer's market here, or be able to coordinate with the bridge events and use our property to creatively use that space so both parties can take advantage of that great connection. Next slide. And again, our vehicular path, while this is not just a pedestrian connection, we have to get folks in and out of the parking. Not only that, we have some maintenance issues and electrical utility issues that still have to use this path for functional purposes. But you know, we really felt how this gets used and detailed, and that shared pathway happens is really critical to the success of this project and its proximity to the bridge. Next slide. So here we've shared our conceptual site lighting plan, tried to select fixtures that led us a little bit to the historical feel, but still that touch of modern, not exactly recreating. Sconce lighting on the building, obviously the pole lights interspersed throughout the plaza, so we're well lit. We continue those sconces all along the south side, again, trying to make that underpass and events have decent lighting. And then we've created some fun spaces at our entrance to the building from the plaza and our entrance to the connection with these string lights, bringing a little interest and a little wow via the use of light to those areas.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Are other people seeing the slides advance, or maybe it's just me?
Yes, I'm
Right
seeing
now,
them.
right now I still see the ground floor and site plan.
Oh, we're on site lighting plan.
Are other people seeing that slide, or is
Mhm.
I'm seeing them advance.
I'm seeing site lighting
Yeah.
plan only.
okay? I don't know what's wrong with my screen. Thanks, everybody. I'm following along on my other computer, so that's okay.
You
Okay.
don't get to
I think
see
it's-
site lighting today.
Please
Yeah,
proceed.
you
Please proceed.
have the PDF that you can look through on your own, essentially.
I can still follow along.
Okay.
Thank you. Please continue.
So next slide, we get into some of the landscape. Nope. Oh, sorry. Floor plans just representative of the floors above first. We didn't touch much on the amenity spaces that we have on the first floor. We have a little amenity space on the third floor. You can see that roof area we've opened up to be accessible. And then on the seventh floor, that hatched area on the north will also be roof accessible for the residents. Next slide. Okay, here's landscaping. So we have worked with Richard Washington and CT Consultants to help us develop this. The north side of the building incorporates street trees and foundation plantings to keep that street presence. Along the south side, the shrub beds added internally. The plaza areas include organically shaped beds and planters with lawn areas, a variety of shade trees. I know we took a long look at those trees because we want to create some shade but not block the building and still be able to have events where everybody isn't blocked by a tree. So use those sparingly and thoughtfully. All plantings are low maintenance, drought tolerant varieties, providing seasonal interest. Sorry, you could tell I was reading Richard's little synopsis for me. Next slide. And then we've included examples of the plantings and trees indicated on previous plan. Okay, next slide. And so here's probably our largest deviation, what the exterior of this building looks like. You know, we took to heart a lot of the comments made here before. We were previously mostly gray brick with this patinaed copper looking element. You know, comments that it was too gray, it was too forced. I think we took to heart. We started reselecting materials that we felt just more cohesive and more in fitting with the area. And we started back with the red brick. I think there were previous versions that had red brick. It had come and gone. We kept some of the gray brick, but brought it down to scale and made it really our, what's the word, base, our base element anchoring us. But tried to focus on more detail, as you see in those openings and the corbelling in and out at some of our corner pieces. And then the red brick, how it plays off that. I think everybody kind of liked the arches and just that the feel that the arches, you know, Cleveland brick wants to be arches. The bridge has, you know, those archy kind of feels. But it felt so limited in the last round. So we really tried to look at incorporating more of those in a brick language. So you'll see them three large under the canopy and repeated in the brick elements. So the gray brick, the red brick, and then we have the majority of the apartments where we looked at keeping pretty neutral and letting the brick shine a little bit. So off-white and a charcoal gray to break up the apartment elevations, keeping the black as our neutral. You'll see the larger corner pieces that cornice pieces that we feel help keep us grounded. Black windows, black coping. I think that sums up the materials. Next slide. So same view, but this is focused from a little bit down the viaduct, back from Malachi. Again, toned it down a bit from the hotel entrance, you know, no huge car circulation issues, but still trying to create pedestrian friendly and again, leasing entrance facade. Next slide. So our major elevation along the bridge. Sorry, looking to vary elements along this and not make it seem so monolithic. I believe conversation last time was talking about introducing a little more verticality. So we brought the brick back in those columns to help with that, taking that top course to an all black, kind of offsetting it almost as a penthouse suite and changing the windows there. And then again, creating the juxtaposition of the white that gets to stand out with the two different textures of siding in there next to the charcoal gray. Again, you'll see that gray base as or gray brick as our base grounding piece. Next slide. Here's our first shot, kind of looking at how that ticket booth relates to our centerpiece of brick. How we created that open space in there to really get some pedestrian flow and ability for outdoor things to happen. And I think this slide gives you a pretty good idea of how pedestrians can flow next to the building along the bridge to get to the underpass. Next slide. So here's a shot looking at our connection entrance. Again, as I mentioned, trying to bring this down to a pedestrian scale. So the masonry in and out corbelling we had mentioned that occurs on the front of the building, we've repeated here as kind of our entrance piece. The inset pieces along the path, I didn't mention it on the material page. We're looking at that some arched panels and interspersing that with the salvaged material to create a little textural artwork along this path as I try to get to the underbridge. And again, the string lights to add a little element of fun at our entrance. That's more than just for cars. Next slide. So our shot from West 25th, almost at the corner, your first glimpse at the plaza from this direction, the use of the arches, the mid-level, high-level, medium-level, large black cornice pieces. Next slide. And a more aerial view to get a shot of how that plaza really interacts with the corner and the various pieces of the building. Next slide. Here's a shot moving down West 25th, kind of the opposite end of St. Malachi. We did originally have a lot of retail along this line. We kept the patterning. There will be units on this first floor. But again, with the brick arches and the detailing on the gray brick and the window treatments, you know, trying to create a nice sidewalk experience, not just up against a 7-story monolith. Next slide. So our entire view from somewhere in the air along the viaduct. Next slide. Okay, and here's a great shot from the plaza. You see the handrails, you know, coming up the long stairway. How we feel that entrances, there is the potential for a cafe/coffee bar at this entrance, which lends itself to the outside seating area. But again, some connection to when we have outdoor events back to the inside, how those planted beds feel with, you know, minimal tree, but some shade. Next slide. There's a lot of slides in this deck. Okay, so we took another shot on the opposite side of the connection, kind of with our back to the bridges and our intent to create the ability to have farmers markets, what that pedestrian path feels like down the connection, where potentially pop-ups, you'll see our little farmers market there, how we can make activate that rear space. Next slide. And so we round out with flat view colored elevations just to give a holistic look at the use of materials, the arches, the repeatedness, the elements that we pulled together. Last slide. Okay. And I apologize for not speaking as eloquently as Brandon Klein, but we'll open the floor now for questions, comments, thoughts on our presentation. Thank you.
I have an initial question for staff. Does this project go to Planning Commission or is Landmarks handling everything?
That's a good question. So Landmarks would be handling all the design review and, you know, design elements of it. If there's any need for a change of zoning, which I don't believe there is, I think that's all resolved. So I think this would, you know, Landmarks is kind of the final review of this, but I can certainly look into that.
As far as I'm aware, we are just going to Landmark is our path.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I had a question about how bicycles and bicycle parking is incorporated into this project. I saw one picture kind of on the inspiration
We do have that, don't we?
page, the inspiration slide. And I'm wondering if you could just help focus us in on how that use is. I think that's normally something that might be handled by planning, but since we might be doing all this, I just want to make sure it's factored in case something needs to change. Could you do that for us really quickly?
Sure. If you can, I get back to the landscape plan. We did incorporate bike, or perhaps stop at the plaza and we can just talk through it. Yeah. So we do have can't say that word today. Bike parking incorporated over here.
So on the extreme east end of the property, there's an enclosed bicycle room for residents. For visitors, guests, people at the plaza, there is bicycle parking along the south end of the plaza at street level, kind of by that long skinny planter, and along West 25th, just north of the stepped plaza, along the building there.
So along West 25th proper, yeah, we have bike parking there.
Okay, so that bike parking, you're planning for that to be in the public right of way?
The way the property line is, it's actually on our property, but it is for the public. The property line on this parcel is
quite odd,
strange at best.
Okay, thanks. My final question for this, because there is an ordinance 34915 that says that the bicycle parking needs to be at least as close to the building entrance as the nearest non-handicapped parking space. So because I think if planning or BZA isn't handling this, if we approve this, we'd essentially be granting a variance, and that's not something I would prefer to do, to have especially the residents parking at the extreme end of a property. Kind of makes it a little bit unfair to me. Just wanted to kind of put my position out there. But the rest of the project is very lovely. Just it's a concern with me for the transportation aspect of this, just because, as we all know, Detroit, that's like one of the most heavily traveled routes for people using bicycles. And when they did that under the bridge thing, like there wasn't enough places to put bicycles at for people to then go and walk. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that without dwelling too much on it. I know you've kind of spent so much time on the rest of this project, but I did want to highlight that as a concern that I have.
No, thank you.
I would say that we've definitely got opportunity on the north side to enhance what we've got with some bicycle parking, problem free.
Yeah, just to jump in, while we are the Landmarks Commission will be the design review body on this, if there are, elements of the code that they don't meet, like the one that Angela just referenced, that would still, require a process and a variance. So Angela, if there's a piece of the code that they're not meeting, the Landmarks Commission doesn't necessarily, grant that approval or give them a variance. They would still have to go through a board of zoning appeals process to ask for that variance and demonstrate a hardship. So, so details like that are important, but yeah, if there's a lot of that gets flushed out at the very end of a project too. So, definitely good to keep in mind moving forward.
Jen, I have 5 points here, really quick. The first is on the historic materials, and I know that you said that you're looking on ways to integrate them. I want to see how those were integrated before advancing too much further. The certificate of appropriateness for demolition of that building, if I'm not mistaken, had requirements that those materials be reused. And so I want to know exactly how and where those elements were being repurposed. The second question is, or issue rather, if you look at slides, you can start look at slide 22 or 20, or even the plaza. Any of those slides will do it. Yeah, you could. Yeah, like leave it there. Perfect. So the parking is all on the second floor. And because of the elevation change with the building and the bridge, the parking is what's going to be at eye level for a lot of pedestrians. And I was wondering if you could push the parking into the building, and so that you could activate the second floor as it faces south, as it faces the plaza, the bridge, and then Irishtown Bend. This parcel has the pride of being the main view shed for Irishtown Bend, where the community is putting hundreds of millions of dollars in. And I want to make sure that we get this element right, that it's imperative that the architecture reflect its position here in our community. And so when you're staying at the cafe or you're walking down, what's at eye level there is open parking. Now, granted, there's openings, but you're still going to be seeing cars. And I think we should work on ways to shield, to screen that off from the public viewing. If you could, that elevation is perfect, but also slide. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can we talk about this for 1 second? So this is my first floor almost gets buried a little bit here as we move back towards St. Malachi. So this second floor is parking. You know, we try to address not making it look like garage, but what I hear you're suggesting is some treatment inside of these openings, so it's not just garagey.
Correct, exactly. That's exactly
Okay.
right. I mean, I think the top preference would be if you could swing it to make it usable space. You know, push the parking. You have to look at the numbers obviously, but push the parking to the north so that that space is usable. And if not, then come up with a better treatment to screen off the parking there.
Okay.
We go to slide 19. Yeah, perfect. So in the southeast corner, the one that's in the kind of lower right, you have the brick going up what looks like maybe 2 stories, and then 4 stories above it in the black hardy. I'd really consider taking that brick corner and to hold that corner and taking it all the way up like you do on the southwest corner. So it goes all the way up to within the penultimate floor. Yep. And that could anchor then your 2 buildings. You have the 2 brick towers, for lack of a better word, anchoring the corners and bringing that up. On slide 20 is the one that shows my next point the best. Yeah, right there. So that's a really prominent elevation right at the foot of the bridge and right where Irishtown Bend comes to meet it. We have in that brick section, though, facing south, just a great expanse of brick, and there's no fenestration there, there's no openings, no windows, exactly right there. I imagine there's some sort of mechanical or elevator, there's some reason for that, but if there's a way to address that facade so that it mirrors the western facade of that part of the building and doesn't just give that great brick expanse.
Yeah, understood. That would be, yeah.
There is a functional reason for it. We had maybe not addressed it so much in brick detailing as we have not composed the signage package yet, and thought perhaps we could bring an element in there that really let this building shine from the bridge in a thoughtful sign element. But yes, understood. If not, we need to do something there to give it the same level of treatment the other pieces have.
Great. And you know, when this elevation also shows, if you're a pedestrian on the north side of the bridge walking there, the second floor of the parking garage is right at eye level. I mean, that's right what you're looking at.
Back in here. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yep. There's, I think, 4 different materiality. There's the red brick, the gray brick, the white hardy, and the black hardy. I'd almost prefer if you just simplified it and picked 2 or 3 at the most. Materials. It reads, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but it reads a bit like a residence inn at times. And I think it needs to reflect more of the historic composition of this area. So opposite it, at the corner of you have Forest City Savings Bank, that old building. I think it's roughly 4 or 5 stories tall. It's all composed of two different types of materials, brick and stone. And simplifying it, I think, would actually add to this. And that leads me to the materiality. I'm glad to see that there's brick here. I am somewhat hesitant about modular brick. I've seen it have some problems in other construction. And I know there's a big cost difference, but if there's a way to do actual masonry brick as opposed to this modular brick, or though maybe the technology is advanced, I don't know if Margaret has comments on that, but it just gave me pause. And then with the titanium white hardy, I just fear that that would look dirty. This is a very, I live 2 blocks from here. It's still a dirty city. There's a lot of soot still. There's a lot of stuff from the port. I wouldn't want this to look dirty too quickly. And then my final comment has to do with the plaza. And this has always been a concern of mine. I understand the issues with the elevation, but the sunken nature of it, and I was wondering if there's a way to, there's a better even, yeah. And I know you're stuck with that. And the ticket booth there is sunk and it's at a certain elevation. And so the answer may be there's nothing really to do about it. But if there was a way to raise more of it up to street level, and so it wouldn't be so sunken, I think that would make it more inviting and more friendly. And then my one comment about raising the brick tower up to the penultimate floor, I think would hold true at this elevation as well, that you'd want to have the brick go up all the way to the second from the top floor, just as it does right there on the plaza. Yeah, exactly, right there. Take the brick all the way up. So it's matching, so there's some uniformity throughout the project of brick structures of similar heights. And on a very high level, those are my comments.
Thank you.
I'll jump in here. So a couple points of disagreement on my end from Alex's. So I don't have an issue with modular brick at all. I know that oftentimes in multifamily, there's a conversation to be had on cost versus to get the masonry in. So I don't have an issue at all with the use of modular in order to get the amount of masonry that you have on this building. I also think the second floor parking structure and the entirety of that second floor being parking in the way that you've masked it behind the openings, I think is successful. I think you've done a very good job of integrating that into the facade. I think as about a good of job as you could have done. So I don't have any issues with the way the parking is masked. I think it's going to be, as far as parking goes, it's about as well conceived or well concealed as it could be. And I understand some of the restrictions or difficulties, challenges that are presented in trying to hit those parking numbers that you're trying to chase. So where I'm going to agree with Alex quite a bit is on the material quantities and the way that you've deployed the amount of, it's called the pack clad metal on the facade. So I think that there's too many here and it's starting to lose, it's kind of too much of a good thing here and it's starting to get lost in the wash. So I think you've done too many things at a large scale and you've done not enough at a small scale. I think one of the tactics that was successful in the previous iteration was some of the smaller interventions on the residential windows that broke up or combined some of the smaller openings that created a little bit of a dynamic call it order to the facade that made it feel not as if this was kind of the back of the building, which is what the upper 5 stories kind of feel like on all sides of the building right now. And I think they need something at a smaller scale to reference that this is such a prominent building, such a prominent site. The brick, I think, is successful in the amount of detailing, the amount of deference that it's given in its prominence to its location. But I think the white and the charcoal facade materials don't or aren't successful in the lack of detailing or the lack of additional kind of study. One other note here. Can you explain a little bit more the south drive connection to the parking? It's also a pedestrian connection you've shown in your diagrams in the site plan. Is there any delineation between that kind of multimodal intersection right there? Are you doing anything? Yeah, so as I understand it, that's actual parking, how residents are getting to their parking spaces, and it's also how the public are navigating, between or through the site, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so is it a sidewalk? Is it all paved? Is there any kind of delineation between the two?
So yes, Christopher, about halfway through that plaza where our through the connection where our parking access stops, the texture and the pattern of the sidewalk and then the driveway will change. It remains paved from that point beyond. because utilities, CPP will need to get to the underbridge for maintenance, bridge crews will need to get there for maintenance. So they will need to,
Physically drive.
full access through there for truck turns and all the, the very, just the functional nature of getting back there.
Okay.
Yes, the majority of this is paved, and because the parking is limited to tenants now and not the retail and the restaurant and all these outside sources, we feel it will have a much more limited engagement and not be as sporadic or as much of a cluster of people who know what's happening. So
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, is just to make sure that there was consideration to, there wasn't going to be an accident a week, say, from a pedestrian in a car. But okay, that's great. And then the last one is I actually don't have an issue with the plaza being recessed as it's shown. I think you actually have done as good a job as possible with kind of prolonging that sequence to get down to that elevation. It looks like you've made that ramp as gentle as possible. I think that's successful. I think you've done a very good job, and I appreciate the approach. That's everything I have.
Thank you.
I guess I'll start. I think this is considerably better than the previous proposal. I like a lot of the moves that you made as far as the massing. I like the plaza. I think that's fleshed out a little bit better. I don't mind it being recessed the way it is. I think that kind of creates an inviting spot. Plus you have the potential for a coffee shop with outdoor seating that, yeah, I think it's absolutely inviting. Looking at you had a rendering of the area by the bridge, and you're showing some kind of like farmer's market. So by the bridge, and you're showing some kind of farmer's market setup. And I guess my thought would be, it might be nice to have, I don't know if they're built in or if they're just kind of freely standing benches around, benches in the plaza. The plaza looks like it has a lot of places to sit maybe, but just kind of site benches around and things like that people would be able to stop in those spaces. Can we go to the rendering from the bridge? I think it's slide 19. Is it 19? Yeah, that was the one I would see. I agree with Alex about like raising the brick on the end, that right end in this photo, so that it's kind of at the same height as the one on the left. I like a lot of the moves you made. Like I love the arches in the red, but I think it starts to get really muddled and kind of cloudy in the span between the red brick corners. Like you have one building and it's red brick and it's black coping and it's charcoal above it. You have one kind of building type, and then you have another building type that's gray with white, or sometimes it's gray with charcoal, or sometimes it's gray with red and charcoal, like those verticals. And I think it's kind of getting a little bit muddled. And I don't know if you clarify. I don't know if you reduce the materials or if there's just another form that might work a little bit better. Like that center span is not speaking to me so well. I also think, I know last time we talked about relief. I think this elevation could benefit from some of that. I think whether it's like, I don't know, the top floor where that black is stepped back a little bit. I don't know if you guys are having balconies or anything for individual units, but well, I don't see any. I just see an outdoor area in the back, but I don't know if the top floor steps back here or if that middle portion where you have those vertical brick piers, if that entire thing steps back a little bit. I think it might have a better play with the bridge and the street going down Detroit. But yeah, this elevation is a little bit missing it for me at the moment. Um, let's see. The Can we go to perspective of the back along Superior Viaduct? So I know you talked about introducing the gray brick as a way to kind of bring down the scale, but this I don't think it's brought down enough. Those gray brick portions with the rectangular openings are kind of giving me super modern, like department store vibes or something. I like the gray brick and I like the idea. I just don't think it's quite brought down to people's scale yet. And I don't know whether that's making those rectangular recesses, maybe breaking them up. Maybe the rectangle's a little bit shorter and maybe there's another recess above it, or I don't think that they're really bringing things down the scale, especially along the back here. And that's kind of a big concern for me because you are right across the street from the church and you're right across the street from their annex, and that's where you have that's where you have, students coming in for after school programs and unhoused folks coming in for like pantries and things like that. And it just feels like those black panels to the left where those two people are standing in front of them, it just feels, it's got that same sort of wall monumentality to it that like I think at the opposite end of this building, and I think in the plaza, you're actually pretty successful with these gray openings because you have filled them entirely with storefront or, and you've kind of brought these things like seating and other elements that make it very personable. I just along the back here, it's not, it's not working for me right now. Um, and then I think that I think was repeated like Chris just said, I have no problem with modular. What ends up happening, I find, is that they end up going to like a utility brick, and that always bugs me. I don't love it. I understand that it would clearly it makes things more affordable. You get 2 utility bricks for every 3 courses of modular, but like um if you can avoid that, or if you can find a good way to play it, maybe the grays and utility and the other one, if it comes up, and it may not even come up for you.
That way
I
we
also-
give everybody what they want. If we do one in modular and one in utility, then we've answered all the comments.
You've saved a little bit of money and everything's all good. I also agree with Chris, I think, about the parking, except along the bridge. Now, it's hard for me looking at can you turn to this perspective from the corner of that recessed, not that one, there's another one. It's on 22, I think.
I don't have slide numbers, so I'm not sure.
Oh, let's see. Go to the next slide. Yeah, there it is. So I kind of think that when you're on 25th, that parking on the left side of the screen is out of view. I think that's totally fine. I like the way you've screened it. It's just walking along the Detroit Superior Bridge, I do imagine that there is a lot of opportunity to view parking, like at least along that span immediately adjacent to bridge. And I don't like I imagine coming down the bridge, you're looking right in the cars, and that it's probably, yeah, absolutely right there. It's not my favorite part. I don't know what the screening looks like. I don't know if there's another option there. Um, it makes sense to have openings. Just to,
One thing we could do, Philip, is we could say, what if it has cow wall or something in there?
Oh yeah.
Or a mesh or, something that veiled it, but because the openings themselves, the cadence of the openings there, I think feel quite nice.
Mhm.
But to your point of if the crash wall isn't high enough or if the headlights are visible, to Alex's point, something like that to infill that opening so that they still feel like an opening with shadow, but at nighttime there's still the ability for light to spill out, so they feel like a typical residential window above. That could work.
Right. That's an excellent opportunity for exploration. So people aren't blinded by headlights from the interior, like from the right as they're driving down the bridge. Yeah, I think that's probably all I got. I think this was a drastic improvement above what was presented before. And I guess I also just think like there's the red brick building and then maybe there's a second building and I can see it in that plaza where it's gray with a white metal panel over it. Maybe it's just those two sort of building types kind of playing with each other. I think that could potentially be a little bit more successful as far as form as opposed to those tall brick piers along the bridge side. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
I have some comments and some have been stated already, so I can try to be brief. I know we've given a lot of feedback already. I was not on design review in October, so I had kind of the unique perspective of seeing this proposal first, and then last night going back and watching what you presented in October. And I know a lot of the comments stated that it was too monolithic, but when you're using quality materials, I don't think that that's a bad thing. And you know, if you take a drive down the Shoreway, all of the buildings are monolithic. They're mostly historic, but it's a beautiful drive. And so I really liked the detailing of the gray brick. I liked the perforation that you had on the top floor and that color, that contrasting color there. What happens when you break up the massing? I actually don't think that it makes buildings look smaller. I think it's meant to deceive us into thinking that this is a bunch of different buildings when it's not. And that's something that I hope we get away from, especially if someone is proposing quality materials. And so what I've been really hopeful to hear a lot with comments is that it's too much material, which I would agree with. On the eastern and western elevations, I completely agree with bringing that brick up and for it to match, you know, kind of what you see here in the center. Those are going to be very often seen views of the building. Right now, you kind of have, it feels like a floating cornice to me whenever you have them above like the second and third story, and so those kind of just don't make sense. So I like keeping it at the top, you know, of the second to the top story and being consistent with that. I agree about I think it was maybe Alex who said this, that I personally just would lose the white material. I think being so close to the lake that it could be weathered very quickly. And it's just such a high contrast with some of the deeper colors in the red brick and the charcoal. Because what I find is that it's actually very distracting. Your eyes don't know where to go. And if I'm driving on a bridge, the last thing I want is to be distracted. So I think if you could just kind of have the gray on the pedestrian level with the red brick and the charcoal and then leave the materials there, I think that that would help this quite a bit. In terms of the plaza, is there a way to get back to that slide where you see it from kind of the, I think it's the southeast corner? Thank you. I personally like that it's recessed a little bit. This is such a busy intersection, it's going to be quite loud. So I'm very conscious of what people are going to experience if they're actually spending time there. And the noise can be a lot. And so it does feel like a lot of hard surfaces. If there's a way to soften that, I think that that'll help absorb some of the sound. I know there was concern about trees providing too much shade. I don't think that that's a bad thing. What I would like to see from this is that it's actually planned for everyday use rather than special occasion use, like markets or pop-ups and things like that. So you incorporated more greenery, more trees with shade, more seating, more tiers. I mean, even if there was the opportunity to add like a water function or something like that, that's actually like a white noise machine in a public space, especially when you have all the cars. So anything that can dampen the potential sound in this space, I think would be really helpful and make people want to spend more time there. So question, it sounds like the only potential retail space is for, you said maybe a cafe or a restaurant in one area?
Correct.
Okay. And so how would the other, I'm concerned with, you know, if we talk about activating spaces, the best way to do that is to give a reason for people to go there. And so, you know, it's on an extremely prominent intersection where you want to promote walkability. You have the park, the new park going in across the street. And so I worry without a reason to go there that the plaza is just going to sit empty for most of the time. And so I don't, you know, this is the type of programming I think maybe is beyond my pay grade, but I'd really love to see more retail and just like actual activated uses in the areas surrounding the plaza if possible.
Yeah,
That
so
might-
I'll speak to that for a second. We did originally have much more white box retail space, but with the hotel, you know, we had more of a, you know, transient population that would go to that retail while they're in the hotel waiting for the things. And when we moved to a permanent resident, apartment resident type, ownership could not make, had a harder time justifying making those numbers work when if it's, you know, I don't know, a shoe store, the resident's only going there. It's not interacting with the resident that passes by it every day. And also with the repurposing of hotel rooms and to get numbers and units to work. That was part of the factor. However, I will tell you, one large amenity that they have put inside the building is this corner will be pickleball courts. And they do have those, they are anticipating those open to the public, so you could book them or residents have access. So in this arched entry here, that gets you to pickleball courts, which then helps engage a little more of the neighborhood to give them a reason. And then coffee shop here at that, near that entrance piece in the plaza.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be, so are there units then surrounding the first floor of this plaza?
Not on
No,
the plaza side, no.
we have 4 units that will front the St. Malachi side,
Okay.
but not the plaza side.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I still think that there's a concern with it being a very pretty space, but not actually being used in a way that I think everyone would like to see. You know, Angela's point about bike racks, I think it, you know, you could add more bike racks within the plaza. I think that would be fine. Just more ways to use it. I mean, you can really break it up, add tiers, make it very interesting. I think you see a lot of plazas that go completely useless for most of the year, and because there's no retail and the prominence of this space, I think that could be improved upon. But primarily, I liked the more monolithic look, actually, and so the balance that I'm hearing from a lot of others is very important. And so it sounds like hopefully we're all in agreement on reducing the materials and particularly for me, removing the white and then bringing the east and west brick elevations up to the second to top floors.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make 2 very quick comments because we've talked a lot about this. You go to the bridge elevation. Yes, perfect. Yeah, so I think the thing that maybe bothers me the most is the lack of a kind of depth and relief as we're switching between different materials. And so I'd say instead of having kind of a flat elevation to where we're transitioning kind of in the same plane, look at adding some depth there. And then the other thing is just having a consistency when we use materials. So I think the idea of getting the brick on kind of the leading side of this image to the same height as the other makes sense. And think about like what's the relationship between as we switch materials with the base or the top, and general consistency around that. So that's it.
Thank you.
Do we have additional comments?
Is this conceptual or final? What are we doing today?
They submitted for final review. So, I guess the options at this point are to, recommend approval. That can be with conditions or recommendations. You could recommend denial, or if the applicant consents, it could be tabled at this level. They would have to come back with revisions for you guys to review. I will just note for the applicant's sake, this is, I think it's for a lot of comments, and even within the committee, there's a difference of opinion on certain items and certain elements. So, the Landmarks Commission itself may have similar or different opinions. We don't know what those are until we get in front of them. So, this board does make a recommendation to the Landmarks Commission. So, if they do want to table it, they'll need your consent, but that would mean you stay at this level of review. Whereas if they make a recommendation for approval or denial, it would move on to Landmarks, where you'd get another body making comments and giving you feedback. So,
Is the applicant currently amenable to a recommendation to table?
I guess laying out those options, my gut reaction is I'd like to hear what Landmark says as well, right? So to revise and then go and they revise and then we revise back sounds not so fun for me. But to hear what they have to say based on this presentation, and then perhaps we agree to administratively come back. I don't know the logistics there with how we hear your feedback, hear their feedback, and then can represent, whether that's tabling conditional approval, but how it gets us to hear Landmarks as well, I guess is what would be my preference.
yeah, it does get a little tricky because, so I mean, I think there are a few things we could do. I guess if we get a recommendation, for an approval of conditions, whatever, denial from this committee, and you went to Landmarks, you could kind of go with the mindset that you probably wouldn't be getting a final approval, and staff could make a recommendation that it be remanded back to local to work out final details, which, this is the local design review committee. Or, you could just come back as sort of a report, without seeking a recommendation from them. Well, I guess if the Landmarks Commission tables it, then, it's tabled there. So they would need to untable it before it was looked at again. So I think,
Can I
yeah,
make a recommendation? I mean, can I make a suggestion? Why
Sure.
don't we move to approve with conditions, and we'll try to put those conditions that I think we were all in agreement on, but with an understanding that the applicant would be coming back after hearing Landmarks comments, assuming that Landmarks doesn't outright approve it next Thursday.
If we were to deny it though, which I don't think it's denied, like I would, there's still conditions. Would it have to come back to us regardless if we denied it?
No, if he has recommended denial, that recommendation would be passed on to the Landmarks Commission, the same way that an approval
An
with
approval
or
would,
without
okay, so there's
conditions
no
would. So,
difference.
yeah, tabling is really the only thing that kind of ensures that it stays at this level and doesn't advance to landmarks. But and that's kind of why we have like the concept or the schematic level designs, because you get to hear from landmarks and the local, but with this project, we've all seen it in different iterations of it several times. So, at some point we need to move on to a final approval. So I personally think that Alex's, recommendation makes sense. A motion to recommend approval, if these conditions are met, then you guys can specifically lay out which conditions, which, elements you have an issue with. The applicant could have the opportunity to make those changes or go to the commission with this presentation, and I would share your comments with the commission. And then, depending on what the Landmarks Commission did, I'm sure we could bring it back, if nothing else, as, just sharing the revised design with you guys so that you have another chance to see it.
Can one of the conditions just be that they have to show us before it's, once it's approved or denied?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like
It's
as
fine,
a-
it's
as a
totally fine.
Formal meeting and presentation, or do you guys, it would just, sharing it with you as a Dropbox link be sufficient? Like, I guess I'm wondering, I don't know if if the commission were to approve it outright, then it would be approved, and, they could, they may set conditions to it, and then it would be typically up to staff to evaluate if those conditions have been met before we issue the certificate of appropriateness.
Gotcha.
Okay. Dan, so if we want to see modifications prior to it going to landmarks, we have to table it.
Yes, yeah, if you want to see it again before it goes to landmarks, it would have to be tabled, and you'd need the consent of the applicant to do that. So
Okay.
it's kind of the applicant's right to move through the process. And so they can do that with either, recommendation to approve, recommendation to deny, and, conditions that can be placed on any of those. But if they want to hear from landmarks, that's their right. So they would have to consent to a table if it was going to stay here.
May I make a motion to recommend a table with,
I would second.
Does the applicant, I guess, consent to a tabling?
Can I say no?
You
I
may
guess,
say no.
is there another path that, the conditions bring me back here? But I still am very interested in landmarks comments. And I kind of feel like, at least because this presentation is so drastically different from what we were here with last time, to get all of those comments out in the open, so we can address holistically is I feel our best path. So
I
I'm
have
not
an
sure.
idea. I have an idea how to accomplish this. What can we convert this into conceptual, and therefore an up or down approval is not required, and convert it to conceptual at landmarks? And then therefore, after you hear all comments, you come back for final approval from this board. If we convert it to conceptual, I think we can accomplish everyone's objectives.
Is the applicant comfortable with just basically taking the feedback you have now? There'd be no vote, no recommendations passed on to the Landmarks Commission from this meeting. It would just, the Landmarks Commission would look at this presentation, as a fresh presentation in response to the last time you were in front of them, and then they provide their feedback again with no vote. And then you'd have to come back to this committee for final review and approval after you made some revisions, and then move on to the Landmarks Commission again for final approval. Does that make sense?
I understand the process, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right, understand what you've described. Yes, I'm sorry. Ben, what do you think about conceptual approval?
I think conceptual is appropriate here.
Because that gets us to landmarks. And if landmarks is very comfortable and defers back to design review, we could still keep pushing that forward or things forward.
Yeah.
I think we'd be amenable to conceptual as opposed to tabling that lets us keep moving the process. Kind of along two separate but equal paths, so that we can get to one nice answer for everyone.
Okay, yeah, if you're comfortable with that, then, you know, at this point, we don't need a motion from anyone. There'll be no votes, just you've heard the feedback from the Historical House Design Review Advisory Committee, and we'll get you, I believe we have you on the tentatively on the agenda for next week's meeting of the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. So unless the committee members have other comments they want to make.
I think we can bring this to a close.
Actually, if I could ask one more question while everybody's here. So tentatively, the 25th for landmarks. Do we have the next dates in front of us to come back here with that submission? And
so yeah, the next meeting of the
I know, but
Historical House
meetings got
City-
kind of messy because of the cyber attack and the 4th of July, and I just want to.
a little bit. Yeah, so the next meeting of the Historical House City Design Review Advisory is August 1st, where there's one on the 15th as well. And we would need, I guess, keeping in mind that we would need revised drawings, you know, or revised presentations for those by July 25th for the August 1st meeting, or by August 8th for the August 15th meeting. So I'm assuming, you know, after you get feedback, there'll be some modifications. I think, you know, you'd probably be looking more at the
August 8th and August 15th, so we at least in front of landmarks before we come back.
yeah, so you could go to landmarks on July 25th, and then you'd have a couple weeks to make your revisions. Then on August 8th would be your deadline to submit a new presentation. We could see this at the Ohio City Committee on the August 15th, and then you could go to landmarks potentially on the August 22nd. Does that? It's a lot of dates, I know.
It's okay. Not as many as Springfield Township, which sounds so surprising, but
They were easier than Springfield to.
yes.
I'll have to start bragging about that.
Well, we appreciate everyone's feedback and comments today, and we leave with conceptual approval. Is that?
No, there's no approval. Yeah, it's just feedback. So yeah, you've gotten your feedback. And I'll give a brief summary of it at the commission meeting next week.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Do I have to call this to a close? I guess.
Yeah, I guess adjourn. This was a
Being adjourned.
Straightforward one for you, Phil.
All right. Less stress. Meeting at what is it, July 18th. Historical Ohio Design Review Advisory Committee is adjourned.
All right. Thank you all very much.